And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk. Charlotte, North Carolina. Michigan State loses the second round to North Carolina. Everybody saw it. You all saw the game. We'll talk a little bit about things that went wrong a little bit, the program going forward, what Izzo had to say afterward. A lot of interesting things going on. First of all, Michigan State played really well. You guys saw it. And people were fired up, and for good reason. The Michigan State was so hot for the first 10 minutes. It looked like Michigan State that you've seen before, having watched Michigan State through various NCAA tournaments. Haven't necessarily seen them win a lot of games this year, but when that stuff was happening, it was like, oh yeah, this is Michigan State, this is happening. And it reminded me of against Florida in the second round in 2003, reminded me of when we were here against Virginia, watching Michigan State play against the Cavaliers when they were a number 2 seed, when Travis Trice was hot and they got off to like that 20-5 start. Michigan State unable to sustain today. North Carolina, to their credit, just kept pouring offense at them. And like you mentioned in your story, that pressure defense by North Carolina in the backcourt helped turn the tide. Michigan State faced a tough team in North Carolina. Michigan State's going home. Izzo is soul-searching a little bit, trying to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. He said things like that before. He was taking this pretty hard, but he's also motivated. A lot there, Paul. Pick and choose. What do you think?
Well, one of the things is we've seen some losses that were lopsided in the NCAA tournament before. I'm thinking the Memphis loss with Drew Neisel's team. This
Sweet 16.
That wasn't like that. This wasn't like that. The fact that it's a round of 32, Michigan State's playing a 1 seed. That's the problem. That's what happens when you lose to James Madison. That's what happens when you lose, at Nebraska when you had a chance to beat them. That's what happens when you lose at Minnesota and you had a chance to beat them. So you got all these kind of things conspiring against Michigan State, and they get a 1 seed in its backyard. And I'll say this: I felt better about this Michigan State team than I felt about some of the 8 seeds or something like that Michigan State has had. I remember when they played, when they beat Miami that one year. That was like Miles Bridges' freshman year and Cassius Winston's freshman year and Josh Langford and company. They played really good against Miami, and then they got Kansas, and I thought maybe they could do something against Kansas, but they didn't have enough talent. This game, I felt like Michigan State was right there, and they did enough good things where, as good as Carolina is, I thought Michigan State could have been there. Maybe I'm not going to say should have, because once this thing started turning, the home crowd advantage really, really poured on. It was insane in here in terms of how loud it was pro North Carolina. And the only thing I can compare it to, and even more so than this comparison, is back when Michigan State has played in Detroit in some NCAA tournament games. I think of that game against Michigan State Memphis. That was a huge pro Michigan State crowd. As soon as the thing started, Michigan State started pulling away, everyone was cheering, and Memphis had no chance. To Michigan State's credit in this game, they fought back in the second half, got within 2. But as was the case, I think in both halves, some of the flaws on this team, some of the shortcomings kind of showed up. And warts cost you this time of year. North Carolina, they did a nice job of getting a lot of production from a lot of different pieces. In Michigan State, kind of at the worst possible times, some of those warts popped up.
Playing a team like this, like North Carolina, like you said, the problem is facing a team like North Carolina that was good, facing them this early.
Yeah.
Which gets back to what you're saying about losing too many games. This Michigan State team was better than that team that beat Miami and lost to Kansas. That was a rebuilding year for Michigan State. This was not a rebuilding year. Everybody knows this was supposed to be a better team this year, all year. And we saw elements of that against Mississippi State, saw elements of that in this game. Saw elements of that twice against Purdue, a pretty good Purdue team.
Baylor.
Yeah. So it's not like that team has been like missing in action all year. There have been flickers. And the problem is they lost so many games. They could have beaten a lot of teams in the NCAA tournament tonight, but they played North Carolina in the second round. Yeah. The trick is to play a team like North Carolina in the Elite Eight a little bit later, once you get them away from their home state, and once you've had a couple more games, a Michigan State team that's on the rebound, and you get better every week, every game as you move forward in the tournament. We've seen that before. That's what this team was missing, and why was it missing? It's because they lost too many games during the regular season. And I have gone on record saying losses in the regular season can be overrated. It's often overrated. As long as if you're going for a Big Ten Conference championship, wins are important. Barring that, If you're losing a couple games to Purdue, not that big of a deal, unless you wind up an 8 or a 9 seed. If you win enough games along the way to be a 7 or a 6 or a 5, you can do Michigan State damage. You don't want to be worse than a 5 or 6. And a lot of people out there are saying, "Why, this is a blue blood program. You should never settle for being a 6." I'm just saying, if things don't go perfectly like they did this year, you still need to salvage a few more, get up to a number 6 or 7 seed, and this team could have clipped off more victories, gotten further before they ran into a North Carolina, and maybe by then things could have been a little different, but didn't make it happen.
I mean, we're talking about like what they could have done against teams like Arizona or earlier in the season, or like good teams in the Big Ten. But you just look back at that last week, of the regular season. You're like, if you beat Ohio State, like you should.
Iowa,
like Iowa, that was
wins.
Michigan State, that was a flat team. But I mean, just a couple. It's not much different. And you're going to have seasons like Michigan State had this year, where maybe you lose some close games. But this team shouldn't have been a 17, 18 win team. It should have been comfortably in that 21-22 range, even with some close losses. And that was the problem tonight.
So you get North Carolina, and they are not flat. They were Michigan State punched them a little bit and had North Carolina on their heels the first 10 minutes or so. But I said that North Carolina better not come with their C game, and they didn't. Harrison Ingram coming out, 5 out of 7 from three-point range. He's an X factor. Hey, he's a power forward that can get down low and do booty ball on you, but he can also hit threes. Today, 5 out of 7 from 3 was a big X factor. Baycott didn't hurt him a lot down low, other than getting to the foul line.
And I felt there was times where Michigan State helped off at times, and they got down to. I mean, there's a couple of times I felt like, that some of the other guys that could do damage, probably should have done damage if Baycott would have kicked it out. There were some openings, and I thought going into this game that Michigan State would kind of let Baycott do his thing, and but Ingram was a big X factor in this, and he was one of the differences. I think sometimes because of what happened last year with Carolina, we kind of have that frame of reference for what Carolina is, and one of the things that Doug Wojcik was saying yesterday. Before this game is that Carolina, they didn't make the tournament last year when they were preseason number 1, and they went out and they got some complementary pieces that really felt that were really high quality guys,
Sure.
like Cormac Ryan and some of the guys like that. I just felt like Carolina had guys that played their roles, like Ryan. He made some shots. He didn't have to do what he did at Notre Dame against Michigan State last year. But when he was open, he had to make some shots. And I thought also he looked way the heck more athletic than he did last year in terms of getting back, stressing Michigan State enough with that transition. Not always scoring, but I mean they ran Michigan State hard tonight.
They run. North Carolina runs, and when Michigan State made a little mistake, boom, North Carolina is counter breaking like they've done all for 30 years. And Cormac Ryan hit a three-pointer during their big run late in the second half, and also the one from the corner to begin the second half. He goes 2 out of 5 from three-point range, 40%. That's his role,
and then
he checked in with that for sure.
And then you throw in one of the Christers, like R.J. Davis hit that was great defense by Tyson Walker, and fading away.
Shot clock's down to 1 or 2?
It was under 5, fading away. He puts up a prayer, banks off the glass.
And then Ingram has the one that goes around the rim and in. So credit to them, they made both of those. But 6 points makes a big difference in a game that was down to 5 with 8 minutes to go.
Not only did he have the one that went around the rim and in, he also had one in the first half, like during that big run, where it was like a transition 3 and it kind of hit the front rim once and then it went in. And, I'm not used to seeing rims that soft in the NCAA tournament, but Carolina did a really nice job of responding, and their crowd carried them in this game. Michigan
State got to the rim, and I think there were 7 block shots by North Carolina. All 7, I think, came at the rim, and 3 or 4 were Hogard getting in there. Yeah. And Hogard, we've seen him drive last year against USC and Marquette in the tournament, most notably this year, missing some drives. He's aggressive. He's strong. That's part of his game. He went in there. God bless him, getting in there, trying to make something happen. North Carolina, to their credit, rim protection being a big factor, and all those things added up.
I'm going to go back.
It didn't seem like a 16-point game, did it?
No, it didn't. And I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to what I've said a few times about A.J. Hogard, and I don't want to be critical of him because I think he's a good player, and I'm tired of the people just saying he's terrible. Hey, watch. I know a lot of you don't want him back next year. But then, if Michigan State were to play Villanova, let's just say if he was there and he goes off for 25 points, I'm going to have people texting me and say, oh, too bad we don't have A.J. Hogard this year. I'm just saying. But one of the things he was able to do one of the things he was able to do last year a lot more of, he was able to hit an elbow jumper. He was able to get those post entry passes a little bit, and he was able, against Penn State, I'm thinking of, and he was able to kind of do a little jump hook. He was able to use that big size and score in different ways than straight line drive and layup. And I think one of the things that made him more effective in those drives to the basket was because of the threat of a mid range shot. He had more to his game. It wasn't just a 35% 3-point shooter. Drive to the basket kind of guy. He had more to his game, but I think also Michigan State had a consistent stretch four. And Joey Hauser, and the floor was spread more, and opponents had to account for that 3-point shot of Joey Hauser. So it's not all on AJ Hogard and the fact that he doesn't have the mid-range. I do think that it's harder for him to score at the rim when you don't have a four-man that can knock down the three at a high percentage.
We talked about the importance of a four-man knocking down the three today. Malik Hall had 3 open three-pointers, could have really turned the tide. Didn't make those. I mean, he was 6 out of 10 from the field. He was 6 out of 7 in medium range. Was excellent in the post.
And he looked good.
North Carolina had trouble early in the game. He saw there was no double team, and he was able to work counters. He was terrific to the point where North Carolina had to start doubling him and fronting him. They had to adjust their game to him. Mm-hmm. So it's too much for me to say, hey, if he'd only gone 2 for 3 from 3, if he'd gone 2 for 3 from 3, he ends up with 23 points, and he'd be 8 out of 10 from the field. I mean, that's ridiculous to ask for that. But
it is, but it's not asking. It's not asking for that per se of him in particular. It's saying
Ingram kind of did the reciprocal of that.
But it's saying what Michigan State needs and what Michigan State historically has used. And it's been such a huge part of what Michigan State does.
But not 8 out of 10. I mean, that's a lot to ask.
No, it's a lot to ask. But he's one of the consistently problematic things with Malik Hall throughout the year, not just him, but the program in general, is you don't have a four-man that can hit an open three, and that does change the calculus in this offense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, he's done a lot of great things. Great post player in a lot of ways, good at the drive. His free throws are good. He had a good game rebounding tonight. But Michigan State did not have the threat of an open three at the 4, and they kind of really need that.
That big run at the end of the first half, they hit 4 3-pointers and they hit 8 free throws. Meanwhile, Michigan State had like a 2 for 10 kind of drought. Right. And I mean, when Michigan State just had a little bit of a cold spell or anything, North Carolina was there to pounce.
But the thing that they did better too is also making sure the ball did not go to Tyson Walker. I mean, they did a really, really good job on defense.
The pressure defense in the half court, they've been doing it all year. That's something different about this North Carolina team than teams in the past.
And then the other thing you look at is Malik Hall. He wasn't able to get that diagonal little entry pass. They were all over that.
Okay.
They were all over that. I'm going to move this one.
All right. You want to go on the court? Are we better on the court?
No, we'll just move that. Anyways, he was able to get the ball. I mean, Malik Hall was able to get the ball unimpeded on some, in the lane a few times early on in this game. When they were making that run, Tyson Walker couldn't get the ball, and Malik Hall did not get the ball in a good place to score for him.
All right, Izzo, talking about the future, he was asked a little bit about that. Izzo's being hard on himself, saying, I got to do a better job finding out what makes this team tick and those type of things. And he kind of he said on the podium that, not sugarcoating it, the season was a disappointment. It wouldn't have been if they'd have won a couple more games here, and that's kind of what he was expecting. He fully expected to win this game, and when it didn't happen, he's saying it like it is. He's taking the brunt of the punishment on that, and he's saying he's going to find out what he needs to do so that he can get through to players earlier. Easier said than done. He's got some players moving out. He thought that, Hogard, a quote that Izzo said tonight is that if Hogard had showed as much leadership all season as he has in the last 3 weeks, he thinks that would have made a big difference. But Hogard has been like herding cats, through his career. A lot of ability. Never a guy that wanted to be a leader, but that was formed into a certain to an extent a leader here in the late going, doing what he can and so forth. But Izzo, saying that he wants to tap into the hearts and minds of these guys earlier so that a season like this doesn't happen again. I respect what he's saying there, but it's philosophical, but it's not a nuts and bolts and wrench easy, tangible fix.
Yeah, but we've seen other seasons at Michigan State where, like, I've been in the locker room after games like this, and I've seen like stuff that I would consider alarming. Guys not taking it seriously. You saw a guy, like a guy like Garrick Norman, who was weeping in the locker. And I don't mean to single him out. I'm just saying it was an emotional time. He's in the locker room weeping, and he's weeping for the seniors in this program. You see like Trey Holloman. Like I asked him when he's going to get back to work, and he's like, maybe tonight. Maybe I'll be in the practice gym tonight and taking guys with me, that kind of thing. And there's some good people in here, and it's easy to look at. It's easy to look at what Michigan State is losing, and say, hey, they're not going to get this back, or they're not going to get that back. But if you have good people in the program, and you're getting good talent, and I think Michigan State is going to get good talent. I think they will get good talent. I think it's naive to say, well, Michigan State isn't going to get players. There's a lot of schools around the Big Ten that would love Michigan State, the players that Michigan State gets, but they are going to have to get good growth from guys, and you're going to have guys step up and provide leadership. And I'll give you one example of a guy that I think will provide leadership and did provide leadership during the huddle before the game. Jeremy Fears had the guys that were the reserves. The starters were over here getting ready to come on the floor, and Jeremy Fears had the reserves huddled around at the end of the bench, and they were, he was chirping at them and getting them fired up, and guys are really into it. There are some guys that I think will be vocal. I think Trey Holloman's going to be a vocal leader, and I think Jeremy Fears is a vocal leader, and I think they are going to get some players, and maybe some guys that fit better together. I think sometimes if you're looking at what's maybe wrong with Michigan State sometime. And I look at how North Carolina improved. I think North Carolina, it's not the talent level overall, it's how the pieces fit together. And I think Michigan State needs to do a better job of addressing how guys might fit together. They can't go without having a four that can shoot that. They've got to have different guys. They need to get some length in there. They need to get, every time Michigan State plays a team with some 6'7" guys, they have some length. Michigan State needs a couple of those guys, or more of those type of players, like they had when they had Kenny Goins and Xavier Tillman. They've got to be consistent, and they've got to try to figure out how they're going to get guys that fit the program, but can play well together. That's what they're going to have to do. He's going to have to look at the program and say, we need this, this, and this, and this is what we have to get.
Xavier Booker after the game said he's coming back, definitely. Izzo, when he talked about returning players, he mentioned Konyndyk, a guy who's a good athlete that's working on his shooting. Kohler's going to get better. But he talked about these people like he thinks that they're coming back, which in this day and age, regrettably, we got to talk about underclassmen and whether they're coming back.
But this is something that Coach Izzo, this is something we hear like Twitter, and you hear all these rumors like this guy's never going to come back, because it's people that are making those rumors are basing their perception on how they think Tom Izzo interacts with his players. One of the things about Tom Izzo is he's up front and he talks to these guys nonstop. So the Xavier Booker type deal, he's been talking to him all year long about, hey, this is where you are, this is where you need to get, this is why you're not playing more minutes. And tonight, there's nobody that can say that he didn't give Xavier Booker more minutes than you thought that Izzo was going to give him, because Booker did give up some things tonight. There were times,
key moment.
There were some times where he really cost the team in some ways. So
actually, it was second half, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the second half, and
gave up a putback, and then there was a time when he was going to double on Baycott, and he kind of was in no man's land, not there, and not double teaming it, and Withers 24 cuts behind him for a layup. It gives up it's just 4 points. There might have been another one, and Izzo, I was right behind the bench. Izzo yelled at Booker,
But it wasn't like...
And Booker nodded at him, I got it.
But it was constructive.
On the putback, Izzo, did one of these where he puts his hands behind his neck, and you know what he's thinking. We've been working on that since November. He's gotten better. We take a chance, we put him in there, and it springs a leak.
But then
he comes back and gets a real difficult bucket. Booker did, but he needed a three. So that's kind of the whole thing.
Yeah, but he gets a real difficult bucket right after he gives one off. That's something that's un-Michigan State-like. Okay,
and it was we've seen Booker shoot this year and do some things in transition, but that's the first time we saw him drive, stop, and pivot foot and hit a 10-footer.
But that's un-Michigan State-like. You look at historically, that's not good enough for Michigan State. Oh, I get a bucket because I give one up. So
he wasn't giving it up on purpose,
right.
You might
say.
No,
I'm not saying he gave it up on purpose. I'm saying
he cared about it, and
but the other guys have cared too and haven't had an opportunity to do that. What I'm saying is that Michigan State gave him a chance to struggle tonight, to learn, and anyone that doesn't see that is blind. And the fact that Izzo's been straight up with Booker, communicated with him nonstop throughout the course of the season. And if you go and look at the teams that he was looking at going to play for, there's not a single team that he was looking at, like Purdue or Indiana, where he would have played more minutes than he played at Michigan State this year. So anyone that wants to use that argument is full of crap.
And he developed. He did develop this year.
And I was shocked at how far he
Me
came.
too.
Even tonight, there's a couple of rebounds where, he's still not where he needs to be, but he developed. But it's also credit to some of the teammates. I was talking to Carson Cooper about some things, and those guys work together. Malik Hall was there for Xavier Booker, Jackson Kohler, Monty Sissoko, they were there for Xavier Booker. So it's been a successful season in terms of his development. Based on, I don't care what the expectations were outside the program. I'm just talking about what he was coming in, how far he came, and I think this is something he can build on. You go look at Cohen Carr, I mean, the best leaper in the country, but one of the things that he didn't do tonight, it's still the on-ball defense piece, and that's going to take all summer, continuing to get better at not just reacting and trying to use your springs to block shots, but being able to stay in front of somebody, and he can't do that yet. I think next year he will. He can be a huge difference maker, and I'm eager to see what happens when he gets, like, not only more experience playing on-ball defense, but also getting stronger. That's gonna be a big deal for him, because I think he can be a beast of a rebounder.
Oh, yeah. And Izzo was asked about basically Hogard and Sissoko. Hogard's got another year come back if he wants one. Izzo says, we've always been kind of looking that, Hogard's always kind of made it known that he's done after this year. That's kind of what Izzo said in so many words. That remains to be seen if Hogard, tests waters professionally in whatever league, or if he goes portal and maybe looks elsewhere. I'm not sure. Izzo did say he feels good about the guy he has coming back to lead the offense, talking about Jeremy Fears. So he didn't come out and say they're turning the page there, but that's kind of what it sounds like to me. And if I'm wrong about that, I apologize. Yeah. But that's kind of the read right now.
Well, and then you've got Jace Richardson coming in, who is, in my opinion, a heck of a shooter as well as a heck of a point guard. I really think
he's a good passer.
I think he's one of the most underrated players in the country, and he's still ranked very highly. He's in that 60 range, kind of similar to where R.J. Davis was coming out of high school. But the way that Jace Richardson plays ball, I think he's going to be ready to kind of step in, because he gives you he's got a great feel for transition. He plays ball like he's a college player, and he doesn't have a lot of stuff that doesn't translate to the college game. It's not like he's scoring the bulk of his points on drives against, guys that he's never going to get to the basket on. He's got a good feel for spacing. I love the way he drives and pops. He's got good elevation. I think he's going to be a really good player, and I think Kurtang is another guy that is athletic, can score in some different ways. And I'm not sure what Jesse McCall is going to do next year, but I think he's got a super bright future, because he can shoot a jump hook with either hand. He can hit a three, and he's one of the, in terms of being a vocal defensive player, he's one of the most vocal kids I've ever seen at that level, calling out switches and stuff on defense. He's going to be a great ball screen defender. I'm not predicting that next year, but I think as he develops, he's going to be a very good ball screen defender.
All right, and Sissoko is a riddle. You all know what he did all this season, and the end of the year, battling and rebounding and playing defense, and did a great job early in this game. There was a play where a guard was driving and he closed off the baseline and then immediately went back and
that
got
was
to
R.J. Davis on the
and immediately got back to Baycott, because Hogard had tagged him. He gets back and gets him. The ball goes into Baycott, and then Hogard's around clawing at it and he misses. Forcing a miss, that's when Michigan State was at their best. But Sissoko, defense and help and just knowing where to be and just being an obstacle as a big man off the bench. North Carolina had been saying, this guy's a plus. What the hell's going on here? He hits that turnaround jumper, 2-footer, and then the hook shot. That giant hook shot is something I saw him do in practice like last year. And I remember, I think Booker's high school coach was watching practice one day, and Sissoko, this is like 15 months ago in November. Sissoko gets it in the post, hits a couple of these giant hooks, and you know that it's there. I've mentioned it in the message board over the years that he's got this hook shot that looks giant and picturesque. And then we just didn't see it. And then today he hits one, and it looked beautiful. So Izzo was asked, what about these players that still have a year left? And he said, well, I'm going to help them, get to wherever they want to get to, and all, without saying, we're expecting this guy back. But Izzo did say after the Mississippi State game, that with some of their heart-to-hearts that they had with Sissoko, they asked him, do you want to be here? Do you want to do this? So that is still kind of up in the air, and Izzo says that with the way Madi speaks, the way he doesn't talk a lot, Izzo has trouble knowing what's going on with him because of the way he expresses himself or doesn't. So that thing is up in the air for a team that kind of has some other centers. I don't know what's going on there.
But
Paul.
you saw with his body language. I'll go back to the games where he's been a factor as a rebounder. You saw against Baylor, his body language is he wants to be here. You saw it tonight when he gets a big rebound. When he defends like that. And
he was key in that first half.
And not only defense, he rebounds, and those two post moves. You can say what you want about Jackson Kohler's great footwork. Those two post moves that he scored on Baycott, he could score on anybody in the country.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not, Jackson Kohler's got great footwork. He's worked really hard in his post moves, but he can't, even at his best, score on anyone in the country. And I kind of wonder about Monty and postseason, him being on the scout team. And I wonder, instead of being like negative towards Monty, like being derisive or just kind of beating him down for what he didn't do, like when the switch gets turned in the postseason, the positive energy starts coming up. I wonder if that had a good effect on him, investing time in him and trying to pump him back up instead of, kind of getting on him for not doing the right things, because they've got to find a way to get through to Monty Sissoko, because you can score on anybody with that.
It was good, and we've seen that.
And then
I've seen it in practice. Anyway.
You had the rebounding against Mississippi State. They were a dominant rebounding team. You saw the dunk that he threw down against Mississippi State, two hands strong.
I even saw people saying that he should have played more today, and they're the same people saying he should have been on the court a month ago.
Right, and I agree with you. And to me, I don't know. So you're playing Xavier Booker at the 5.
Was he the 5 or the 4?
Was he? I think he was
the 4.
I think he was at the 5 a little bit too. I'm not sure. I can't remember now. It's all a blur. But I thought he played both today.
Now the strange thing about in the good old days where everybody just had their players and developed them and brought in freshmen and developed them, and once in a while you had a transfer that sits out. In the good old days, you just come back with Cooper, you come back with Sissoko, you come back with Booker and Kohler, and you have McCullough coming in, and you just keep working at it. Problem is, people are going to wonder, well, everybody else is going to the portal.
Right.
Go get someone in the portal. Well, if you get someone in the portal, then you're kind of telling someone to leave the program, and that's what Izzo's uncomfortable with. But
that's one of the. Okay.
But Izzo also said Sissoko did not have the year that I expected. That's what Izzo said, and everybody knows that. So he's a riddle. It's a riddle situation, and everybody loves him.
So here's the deal. If you're going to go in the portal, you got to find a way to bring in pieces that you need. I said that before. You look at what Illinois did, and I think they've abused the portal in a lot of ways with what they did. But they were able to keep a guy like Dane Danger, even though they didn't play him a lot, and they were able to use different types of personnel. But if you're bringing in, it depends on what kind of a big you're bringing in, but any kind of back to the basket big you bring in is going to push Jackson Kohler out the door, in my opinion. Carson Cooper might stay because he's got some versatility, but
you're right. Booker did play some minutes of the 5.
Right. So and that's what I kind of thought were
somewhere at the end, but
yeah, I don't know, but Michigan State's got to find a way to have a heart-to-heart with guys and say, we want you back. This is going to be your role. Can you accept this role? And some guys will and some guys won't. The guys we haven't talked about is Jaden Akens. A career 40% three-point shooter, struggled this year, but also you saw the best version of Jaden Akens, during that stretch in the second half when Michigan State pulled within 2 points of, 2 points in North Carolina, scored 11 points in that second half, and you saw the good Jaden Akens, the guy that doesn't think, the guy that reacts and is scoring. But that's another guy you have to sit down and say, hey, Jaden, this is what we need you to do. We don't need you to drive to the basket in traffic and try to be Tyson Walker. We need you to hit threes. We need you to play good defense, and we need you to be that Charlie Bell type of rebounder. That's how we're going to win with you, but it's going to have to be consistent communication. If Jaden Akens, wants to put the ball on the floor, he's going to have to go to a place that lets him put the ball on the floor. But I don't see that happening. You've got to accept who you are as a player, what your role is going to be, but it's going to be on Izzo and his coaching staff to communicate that to the players. Like, we're not going to try to let you be something you're not.
Yeah.
Michigan State is Michigan State, and this is how we're going to win with you. If it was good enough for guys like Travis Walton, if it was good enough for guys like Matt McQuaid, good enough for guys like Xavier Tillman. We see Xavier Tillman hit, in the NBA, he's hitting perimeter shots. That wasn't his role at Michigan State. He tried it. It wasn't good. It's Michigan State. The program is bigger than you are, and if you're not willing to play your role, then they're going to have to find someone else that's willing to do that.
And he has. He's done his role, and he's been he's played defense, and he's tried to rebound.
Right.
But you're right. If he wants to,
I'm using that as an example.
The next layer of his game, he definitely would like to put it on the floor more, and he's tried to do it more this year, and it was curtailed. It wasn't quite there yet. But he has been a good soldier, and he has done what he's supposed to this point, and was great against Mississippi State. But you're right, fourth year. Last year he was tantalizingly close to trying the NBA waters, which he wouldn't have gotten drafted. And he was wisely advised really by people outside his camp to come back. So now he's a junior. Is it an Aaron Henry situation where you think you're ready to go? I don't know. But these are questions in this day and age that we're really not sure about.
Yeah, but Aaron Henry didn't have NIL, to be honest with you. If you're Jaden Akens, and Jaden Akens got a lot of friends that have been around, that are in G League and whatnot. If you're Jaden Akens, do you do what Tyson Walker did, and you understand who you are, and possibly what you could do with a really good senior, like a really good final season. Like if Jaden Akens is that 45% 3-point shooter, if he is a plus defender, like an all Big Ten defensive player, like he wants to be, if he can hit that mid-range jumper with consistency, and he can also get to the rack in transition, that whole idea of getting to the rack in the half court, I think sometimes that gets overplayed, especially when the floor's not really spread. A lot of those guys, if they're able to do it in transition, and we saw a couple times this year where he was able to, drive baseline. But if he can add that to his game, not thinking about taking the ball off the dribble in half court, but getting to the rack in transition and finishing that way, I think that benefits him. You don't have to, I'm look at Bryn Forbes. Bryn Forbes has played a lot of years in the NBA and hasn't, been a point guard. And Jaden Akens, I think, needs to be the best version of himself, but you got to accept your role. The version of him that we saw, against Mississippi State, that's a guy that can help Michigan State win and win at a high level, and that's what Tom Izzo needs from all of his players, is to accept their roles and play them to the best of their ability.
And frankly, we don't know, what that decision could be or would be. When Izzo was talking about Jeremy Fears, he talked about him as, he said he's got a guard that can run a team next year. It's important for a guard to be a leader.
He's got a couple of them. I think Trey Holloman's proved this year that he can run a team.
So when he's talking about Fears,
right.
Sounds to me like he thinks he's good to go athletically. Now, he's come out and done some warm-ups. We've not seen him totally max out to try to jump and run. We don't know, and we've not really asked a lot about that.
But I don't think Izzo
would say that.
He's not going to be saying that if it was a Malik Hall situation like last year, and he wasn't quite sure where the foot was, or if he was going to be, fully back. Izzo's not the kind of guy that over promises and under delivers when it comes to certain issues. When a guy's coming back from injury, he's the first one to say pump the brakes. It's going to take a long time for him to get back. So for him saying that about Jeremy Fears, he has to feel pretty good about where this is headed.
That was my take also, which is interesting. So a lot of unknowns there's just a lot of people that could be in the mix, but this is the fifth time I said it. In this day and age, you don't know, and it's got to drive Izzo a little crazy.
Yeah, and then
but that's what you're competing against, so you got to do it.
But then you look at Trey Holloman. So if Jeremy Fears is coming back, and you've got Jace Richardson coming in, and he's a backup point guard, I think it's. Let's say Akens did come back. I think that's pretty solid there. You've got Akens and Trey Holloman, the guys that can play the two guard, and then you've got Kurt Tang is kind of like he's a long dude. He can be in that. He
Cohen Carr.
He's not as long as he's not like long like Cohen Carr. He's like more in that 6'4" or whatever range, but that gives you some good backcourt pieces. We don't know what they're going to get out of Garrick Norman. I was watching him a little bit in warm-ups tonight, and he's moving better.
He did better in practice like the last month and a half.
And I feel like one of the things that he's done a nice job of while he's been out is I do feel like he's slimmed down a little bit. I don't think he's got as much, like, he doesn't look like a football player out of Texas. He looks like a basketball player. He's got, I think he's, and I know, knowing him, he's a guy that's going to get serious about nutrition and taking care of his body. And I think, going back to that is one of the things that I thought about for A.J. Hogard for a long time. Like, I think if he really wants to take the next step in his development, he needs to get Draymond Green serious about, nutrition and his athleticism, because I think he can be a better defensive player than he showed for most of the season.
Hogard?
Yeah.
So Konyndyk can play the 3, and going forward, I think more of the 4. He can play a small 4. He's working on his shooting, but a horsepower 4. You all right? Yeah, like a horsepower 4, which can give them a different look. Assuming that Booker is coming back and Booker becomes the stretch 4, which means he's going to play defense on some difficult people. He's got some lateral movement to maybe be able to do that and also give opponents theoretically a lot of trouble at the other end. He's the stretch 4 going forward there. I don't see anyone else in that category. So Booker can be a 4. I think starting with Kohler next year and Cooper kind of being our support guy. I don't know where Sissoko is on that whole thing, but I'm thinking it's Booker and Kohler next year to begin with. It can change.
And the other thing about Cooper is knowing Carson Cooper. I mean, and he says as much tonight. He's got a plan for the offseason, and he's going to go after it. He said that he needs to add weight. He needs to add good weight. He needs to get stronger, and he said he needs to get out there and he needs to work his tail off on his post move.
He's a good, solid, functional piece, and it's no small task that they made Baycott work. And Baycott had a couple of hooks there in the last 10 minutes of the game, did damage at the free throw line, but it's not like he was getting it down low and just dominating with no obstruction. Cooper got in there and played 15 minutes of tag team basketball and wasn't obstruction.
Well, getting his nose broken again.
Yeah. So that's useful when you come up against a guy like that in a tournament, and that guy wasn't the reason that North Carolina won. He was part of it.
And you look at Cooper. What he can do is he can move his feet a little bit on defense. He can keep some other tricky guys in front of him, and if he does get stronger, if he is able to do some post moves, that puts a lot of pressure on Jackson Kohler to keep improving. And Kohler's got to so if Cooper gets better and he's able to hit a hook shot with either hand, and we've seen at times where he looked good doing it. The strength piece is part of it. The confidence piece is part of it. But it's also the coaching staff's confidence in him. So if he shows that he can do it, they've got to use that. Otherwise, it's going to erode. I think that was one of the problems this year with the centers. No one had any confidence that they could hit a hook shot, so you don't put the ball inside. That skill set erodes. Just like we saw Jackson Kohler pre-injury. I mean, he's hitting hook shots left and right, and he's got good post moves. He comes back from injury. He hasn't had back to the basket practice in games at all, and he's missing badly, and that's a guy that's been historically good. But if Cooper can get that jump hook down, then to me it kind of pushes Kohler to get the other aspects of his game, not only the post moves but also the 15-footer, like the little stretch, that little jumper. There's a couple of times when I thought he was going to take threes, which I was like, that could come. But that's a long ways down the road, and he's got to stay healthy and he's going to have to earn it with some other things. Like
Meanwhile, every team that Izzo plays against, Cormac Ryan, Harrison Ingram, transfers. Every team they go against, they've got like these impact transfers. And it's something people talk about, fans, media, and so forth. And it's something that Izzo is considering. He'd rather not do it, but he has to go against it so often that's part of it. And he says he's going to adjust. Some of the things he said in the post game today, he kind of hinted at that. He never used the word transfer portal, but man, there's just a lot of things on the plate and a lot of.
I'm just thinking, but here's the thing: the idea that Izzo would never get a transfer. Tyson Walker is a transfer. Joey Hauser was a transfer.
Not in the portal. They weren't portal guys.
No, but I'm just saying in general. I mean, they didn't have the portal when those guys left, so you're using other means. But Aaron Harris, you go back over the years, he's tried to get some transfer bigs at times. Didn't always work out. So just because Izzo would prefer not to use it doesn't mean he's going to use it, not use it. And but one of the things I think Michigan State has to do an effective job of is if you're going to go out in the portal and you're going to get the pieces that you need, it's going to have to be a comprehensive effort, and they're going to have to do the NIL thing.
Well, I mean, everybody, we'll just say it. Everybody's talking about Terrace Reed. The guy that Michigan State recruited a few years ago. He likes Michigan State. Michigan State's had good conversations with him, just being supportive of him. He's in the portal. Michigan's going through their thing. Maybe he'll go back to Michigan now that they hired Dusty May. I don't know. But Terrace Reed is a guy that Michigan State fans have talked about. if by some chance he does want to come here, Michigan State does bring him in, then you're getting rid of somebody. And that goes against Izzo's basketball soul.
Right. So you're getting rid of Jackson Kohler, honestly. Yeah. If Terrace Reed comes in, you're getting rid of Jackson Kohler because, Terrace Reed gives
There's not room.
I mean, Jackson Kohler can't be the player that he wants to be with Terrace Reed there.
Someone you're dividing minutes.
And people can't be like, well, I'll take Terrace Reed and Jackson Kohler and you can get rid of Carson Cooper. No, you can't because they need a big that can play some ball screen defense. I know a lot of you hate hearing that, but you can't have too many of the same pieces if there's some limitations with what you do.
I don't know the answers to this puzzle, Paul.
I'm not sure there are good ones, but I do think that go back to some of the pieces they need. I look at the Mississippi State team. Yeah, it's a collection of odds and ends. But if you can get a couple 6'7" type guys that can play a role for you, that's helpful. I think of like the last time Michigan State was able to match up effectively with Purdue is when they had Kenny Goins and Xavier Tillman. Two guys were able to do some dirty work, some rebounding. That's the other piece.
That's a 4 and a 5, pretty much.
Right, but I mean to have two guys like that can play that can play multiple positions. I think everyone talks about basketball being a multiple position or a positionless game. It's not, but you have to have guys that can defend multiple positions if you want to win at the highest levels. And I think Michigan State would be in a better position if they could get some of those guys. Now, maybe Cohen Carr, if he takes some big steps, can be one of those type of guys, but you can't have enough 6'7" guys that can rebound and play defense.
Right. All right, man. A lot of questions for Michigan State. Good news is they do have some puzzle pieces. They've got a coach who's been a great orchestrator of it in the past. He thought he was onto something this year, and it was looking pretty good there for about 10 minutes, and again for about 5 minutes in the second half when Michigan State made some runs. And you felt it because you've seen Michigan State do it before. And Izzo's felt it because he thought he had something going on here. Problem is you ran into a really good team too early because of the regular season put them in that situation. I get that. So it ends up being a disappointing season. Izzo's saying that, and it certainly was. I wasn't ready to call it that until it all played out. Well, now it has played out, and they were capable, I think, of being a Sweet 16 and beyond, but not with this seeding. Not with this seeding.
It's different. It's different too if you're playing out of the Midwest. If you're starting out in Indianapolis or Detroit or something like that, or somewhere in the Midwest, it's a lot different to play a number one seed in their own backyard. If it's Duke or something like that, you got North Carolina fans out here. If
you're a 5 seed like Gonzaga was today, going against Kansas, Michigan State beats Kansas.
Yeah, and absolutely
the current Kansas,
and you saw Gonzaga do. They used Hunter Dickinson today.
So Michigan State did not get that seed, did not deserve that seed. At the end of the season, they were good enough to do something like that, but they had painted themselves into a corner all year, going back to when they lost to James Madison, going back to when they lost 2 games in early December in the Big Ten season, the 20-game Big Ten season, which didn't allow Michigan State to develop and do things, and they were under pressure all year. And they dropped those games, like you said, against Florida or against Iowa and Minnesota and Ohio State, and that's what cost them. And they got this, they deserved it, and they didn't survive it. So that's what happens. That's the name of that tune. But they were good enough at the end of the year to make a push. It's just the push pushed back on them.
Yeah, and just because you have some guys, some guards, you have some guys that can score like a Tyson Walker, it doesn't mean you're entitled to beat North Carolina. It doesn't mean you're entitled to beat anybody in the NCAA tournament. And I think, it does, a lot of it, some of the stuff is matchups, but this is a hard tournament to advance in. And not always do the best teams win. North Carolina was better than Michigan State today. They deserve to win. But there's a lot of teams out there that had one play here or there that cost them a chance. And we saw last year, going back to what Michigan State did in the tournament last year, I felt like Marquette was the best team in the tournament, and Michigan State got them. I felt like USC was a pretty good team, and Michigan State got them. And the
Marquette game was played in Columbus. If this game had been played in Columbus,
a little bit different, perhaps.
Also, this was 10 out of 12 years Michigan State's made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament. 14 of the last 17 years. People talk about the consecutive tournament streak. 14 of the last 17 years they've been in the second round. And that's why there's a lot of entitled, spoiled fans, and that's fine. Fat and sassy, good for you. You're a Michigan State basketball fan. That's outrageous. 14 out of 17 years going to the second round. When we see some of the upsets going on around there, so hard to do. Program is strong. This season wasn't strong. At the end of the year, they put a lot of the parts together, just didn't get it done today against a real good team in a tough situation. And that really good team answered the bell, showed resiliency. I'll be interested to see what North Carolina does from here. Can they beat Alabama? Can they beat Arizona and go to the Final Four? I don't know. I kind of thought like the team that won this game was going to go to the Final Four. We'll see if that turns out to be true or not. Anything else, Paul?
No.
For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching the VCast from the Spectrum Center in Charlotte, North Carolina with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.